So I guess I've been thinking lately, as I often do. Think often. Overthinking. I think this is a synonym for anxiety. That it's ridiculous to constantly be looking for more information to react to. How many emotions are you supposed to experience in a day? I don't know. It seems ridiculous. It seems so ridiculous. And you look up Trump and these tariffs. I believe he still does not understand what tariffs mean. He refuses to acknowledge that, or he wants his base, I don't know, all the people that voted him in. He wants them to have the impression that tariffs is something other countries pay. This is, this is not the case. It's, right. If he puts 25% tariffs on everything from Canada, Canada isn't paying America money to import shit. The companies that are working inside of America are paying 25% more for Canadian shit to the American government. You're charging Americans more for importing shit from outside the country. And this is what incentivizes the country to manufacture more. And this is his idea. But I mean, ultimately, it's like the reason, and you look at car manufacturing to be specific, the reason car manufacturing works on a large scale is because not everyone does everything. You're importing parts from all these different people, and the fluid transaction of these different companies and all these parts to be able to move around, to be assembled somewhere, and then to have that be shipped somewhere to be sold. That's what makes it cost effective. So when you hinder the flow of resources, you're making everything more expensive for everyone. So I don't know. I think maybe he knows that, and he wants to convince people that aren't interested in reality to think he's defending America. And again, this idea of $100 billion deficit to Canada, a trade deficit. So what does that mean? That doesn't mean you're giving $100 billion to Canada. That doesn't mean free money. That means Canada is selling you $100 billion more of shit than you are selling to Canada. That's what that means. Sell more shit. You know what I mean? And I think most of that is just crude oil that cannot be processed in Canada because Canada does not have the facilities to process it. Lo and behold, America does. America buys a shit ton of crude oil from Canada and then processes it from the tar sands in Alberta. They're processing that makes up more than $100 billion fucking dollars. But for some reason, this is a subsidy. I don't get it. It's there's one thing I'm so grateful for, I guess, with having Trump in office as a president in America. It's like, if you were not that interested in the truth, I think you have to be now. Because it's actually going to affect your life directly. What this guy who doesn't seem interested in the truth does based on his own feelings about what the world is. And I say all of this, because it's like, right, Trump is in office and it's only been 45 days, 43 days, whatever. And all of these changes are happening. When I look at Trump, I actually don't ultimately believe everything he is doing is terrible. His reaction to Zelensky is quite ridiculous. But this underlying interest, and it's like it's hard to tell with all the bullshit he sputters, but this underlying interest in having a normalized relationship with Russia, I think is very interesting. And the fact that there was a war in Ukraine that extended for that long, for 3 years, and it continues. It has not ended. There has been no peace agreement. It is a shame. And for Boris Johnson to proudly proclaim this war as a proxy war for the rest of NATO, and it's like for Joe Biden to not negotiate the entire time he was in office, to find a way to come to a peaceful agreement, for the fact of, like, even all the way back to Bill Clinton pushing the expansion of NATO regardless of Russian concerns. Again, Putin makes this address in 2007, like, please, you are threatening our national security. Please stop expanding NATO. Right. There's reasons that all of this happened. Putin is still, a monster. There's a million people dead because of his action. We can't even contemplate how many people that actually is. That's a fucking sea of blood. That's an absolute sea of blood. I can't even imagine. We cannot even imagine our own deaths, our own personal deaths. We barely understand it when our friends die. You know what I mean? Imagine an entire generation of young people fucking just dead. And not just soldiers, civilians, many civilians. It's incredible, the bloodbath that is, casually taken. And in all fairness, I don't imagine it was casually taken on Putin to do this. But again, the blood is on his hands. But I imagine it's also on quite a few American presidents. As if they are the ones making that choice. I wonder, but we are seeing the limits of that with Trump. If he manages to survive for 4 years, because I have a very strong feeling, and it's not even going to be a stranger that assassinates him. I don't think it's going to be a random citizen. I think it's going to be someone within the government that assassinates him if he does get assassinated. Most definitely. I think there are many plans in the deep state, and for some reason he's still supportive of Israel, which is insane to me. If he's against war, I don't know why the fuck he's supporting Benjamin Netanyahu. I think he's quite interested in war. He's quite interested, not even in war, he's interested in obliteration. So that's shocking. But and I must apologize to speak so much just about this, because it's a shame. It's a shame for this to be taking up all of our capacity to think. And this is something, listening to Jeffrey Sachs, I thought was incredibly interesting, that he thought was the biggest concern. He thought that this was the biggest bottleneck for creating a better world is human bandwidth, the limit of our attention. And he thinks we have to make it popular to be interested in the future, because otherwise everything else takes that space in our heads. Trump takes that space in our heads. And what does that mean? An interest in the future. It's like, that is not participating in warmongering. You know what I mean? Because that is a shortcut to not having a reasonable future, is being interested in war. That is a shortcut. That is an absolute shortcut. All of NATO feeling like it's fine that Ukraine does not negotiate, that we should keep supplying Ukraine with weapons and not negotiate to end this war. This is warmongering. This is imagining that there's a positive outcome out of war by continuing. I think there isn't, and I think all these ideas of annexing Greenland and Panama and Canada, it's like, this is violent. This is encouraging an extremely unstable future. Right? We don't have to continue to dwell on this idea, but warmongering with China, all of these things, it's like, this is dangerous. This is dangerous for our future. And not to speak of, like, right, the civil war that's been going on in Sudan that is being supported by all these other countries. And it's like, proxy. How many proxy wars? And you will not see in the news what's happening in Mali. You will not see in the news what's happening in Burkina Faso. You'll find it on Instagram. Praise God. It's like there's a decentralized source of information. Right. How amazing is that? But if it was up to mainstream media, we would not see that. We wouldn't, you wouldn't know that there's a coup happening to overthrow French rule in Burkina Faso, that France is still a colonizer. Lo and behold, to this day, it's like surprising, but the practices are updated. It's called neocolonialism, and it's mainly done through trade. Very, very, very unbalanced trade. But I meander away from the point I mean to make, which is also, to the detriment of what I think is important, is that we only have so much bandwidth, and why not spend it on, we need to prioritize it. Something that is quite funny, very funny actually, with the situation I'm in. I don't have internet access generally. So I have to go out to the beach to get internet access, and I'm working during the day. So, most days I'll go out to the beach at the end of the day, and maybe I have an hour or two before the tide comes in, and then I'll just drive in. So it's like I have like an hour or 2 hours of access to the internet. So in that time, I must prioritize what I want to see, what I want to take from the rest of the world, from the internet. And I have been noticing it significantly, that it is a shame that it has been nonsense, that it has been people, doing things in such a backward way. And it's like, we are not moving forward in many ways. It's like, why is it such a struggle to be interested in peace, in a long-term peaceful planet? It's like, we are not fighting for resources. And I think you can speak to any economist. It's not a matter of not having enough resources. It's a matter of how do we distribute them in a reasonable way? How do we do markets? How do we trade fairly? How do we do this in a sustainable way? We can do things at massive scales, but without anticipating the side effects and consequences, it is extremely dangerous. And it's like, and it does not require that much resources to make sure that we don't destroy ourselves or our ability to survive on this planet. It's not. And I guess Jeffrey Sachs boiled it down to about 1% of global GDP. So that seems very interesting to me. And it's like, and he makes demands for us. There's things that we have to do. If we are in situations of luxury and comfort, one wonderful task that we can do is, let's figure out how we can end extreme poverty on this planet. That could be a personal task that we participate in with many other people that have seen it, that have taken it upon themselves to participate in making this world a better place. And it's, another suggestion, I guess, is looking at agriculture. The thing that changes the planet the most, that has most significantly changed how our planet looks, is not cities. They're actually a small portion of the surface of the earth that has been altered, but it is agriculture. It is these vast pieces of land that we must turn into grain in order to feed cows, in order to feed people. Right, so this is a massive, and it's not just grains, it's all these other crops that are massively changing our environment, and then all the fertilizers that are being dumped, and then all the runoff of the fertilizers into our ecosystems. So that is a massive area that requires change. And, someone I actually look up to, and I feel quite inspired by, Mr. Bill Mollison. He's dead now. I'm pretty sure he is. I should actually confirm that. I won't be able to until I go back out to the beach. But he is the founder of permaculture. He's the one who coined that term, alongside, I guess, one of his students at the time, but I forget his name. So that's quite a shame, actually. But this idea of permaculture is establishing agricultural systems that simulate nature, which is extremely productive. If we ever notice, we don't have to water it, and it is producing abundance without our participation. This is an ideal system, and he takes it on himself to reorganize these natural systems to produce things that we desire most. But it's simulating what nature already does quite well, and it's working with nature as opposed to against it. So it's taking all of the resources and energy that is already in the system without destroying it, because this is what happens with monocrop farming, is that you destroy all of the ecosystem that is there and you replace it with one thing that needs to be particularly supported, or it dies. That's why we need DDT. That's why we need all of these pesticides and herbicides to make sure that nothing grows beside this plant. Because if it does, it suffers. It loses to nature otherwise. Why are we fighting nature? Nature is fucking invincible. Why would you want to fight nature? Work with nature. Work with nature to produce abundance without destroying its ability to produce more later. That is in essence what Bill Mollison was extremely interested in. And that is another thing that we can participate in personally. This idea that we should grow food in one place and put it on a truck and ship it all the way to this other place to be put in a store and hopefully bought, likely not, sometimes not. If it has a blemish or any sort of thing, we're not picking that apple up. We're not grabbing that cabbage, so it gets tossed. And this is such an amount of waste and such a waste of fossil fuels in order to, go through this entire process. It's ridiculous that we don't grow much more food where we are, and like, why are so many people interested in these situations of scarcity? This is what I call that's a city. Scarcity. They don't say the full thing when they say city. It's scarcity. It's you're actually living in a desert. When you look around, they've paved over all the soil. And then in the few pots and the few pieces of earth that there are, they've, interestingly enough, turned them into lawns. The least useful, thing that grows on this planet. Literally. Like, what the fuck is a lawn for? This originally is a demonstration of your wealth, to have a piece of land that you do not have to grow food in. That is a demonstration of wealth. Did you know that? Historically, this European tradition somehow made its way all the way over here. It's a demonstration of wealth, and I think it's an obscene ritual practice that we continue to this day, and it's written into our laws that you have to cut your lawn, because if you don't, that's a hazard. Because nature is a hazard, because abundance is a hazard. If you can grow all the food where you are, you'd ruin the economy. It's like, I don't know if that's the logic, and I'm being ridiculous and excessive by saying something like that. But I do feel like it is also ridiculous and excessive not to grow food everywhere we can. And it's it's tiring. And I think Bill Mollison, it's like using the knowledge of what grows well abundantly in each region, you can apply permaculture to take the natural systems and make them more abundant. You do not have to incorporate all of these genetically modified foods in order to exist on this planet. This is unnecessary. This is unnecessary. And the side effects that come with the way we farm currently is dangerous. Not just to us currently, but to future generations, and obviously to the ecosystem and many species that are dying at a very rapid rate because of our practices. Right, so that's another aspect. Housing, sure, that's a global, not a global issue. It seems much more domestic, or it's like each nation will say that. But it's interesting that everywhere in the world, many places in the world, Canada is a ridiculous example, is that it's becoming so expensive to live, and homelessness is such a ridiculous problem in Canada, in Toronto particularly, Vancouver as well. It's insane that it's really a wonder why, if when you look at Norway and you look at Sweden and you look at so many other places in the world that have figured this out. It's like, right, when you give people housing, they aren't homeless. When they can afford to house themselves, they don't go through ridiculous situations that keep them homeless. It's like, and it's just fuck. But the economy cannot bear to give people housing. The economy cannot bear to make housing affordable. Since when was housing the biggest stock to invest in? I thought that was a thing that we needed. Will it be a beneficial future for water to become a stock to invest in? I wonder if it is now, actually. But just imagine this, you know, just just limiting access to water so that it can become more expensive and calling that a good thing. That is what happens with housing. That is what happens with housing. When you stop investing, and I'm speaking about Canada specifically, when you stop investing in building affordable housing for fucking 20 years, guess what? There's going to be a fucking shortage. And it's right, and saying this is good, this is a good market for housing, this is a bad market for people. And I do want to bring up this point that it is not that the economy is not a bad thing. Like, markets are not bad. Capitalism ultimately isn't bad. When you have welfare for billion-dollar corporations, it's bad. When you're allowing companies to carry out practices that absolutely undermine the well-being of the people they sell to, that's bad. And it's right. And when you're in on it, when your government is being bought by these very people to change laws to make it so that they can make more money off the same practices, that is bad. And to be fair, we're not even practicing actual capitalism. Actual capitalism in 2008, all of those big banks would have been annihilated. They would have been destroyed, with the subprime mortgages and right when all these people couldn't afford their fucking mortgages, they would have been destroyed. They would have been completely wiped out. There wouldn't have been a fucking bailout. So this idea that we're even participating in capitalism is strange. We aren't. It's socialism for massive corporations and capitalism. If you're middle class, and I think if you're the poorest in this country, it's like, yes, you get some welfare, but it's a very limited amount, and it doesn't seem to match inflation. And even this idea of inflation is insane. And it's if inflation increases, if you have 3% inflation for 20 years, you've just doubled the cost of everything in 20 years. I think it's taken for granted. And when we see inflation 7%, 8%, 9%, it's like we are being robbed. Everyone is being robbed. When you see inflation increasing and your wages not going up to match it, you are being fucking robbed. And and it's like ultimately I do sit in this belief that to participate in many of the things I described, and I mean there's other things, and it's as if I describe them. These are things that have been described to me that I discovered that I'm extremely interested in participating in. And I think one way to participate in ending forms of poverty, participating in a new agriculture, and it's not even a new agriculture, to return to an old agriculture, that works on this planet and doesn't destroy the ecosystem, that can produce quite a bit of abundance, to build housing, and there's so many other issues, but to at least participate in these three things, it's to me, living off grid. Literally, whatever you're saving your money towards right now, like you could be saving towards a piece of dirt with your friends, and you can go and buy a piece of dirt, and you can still live near your town. You can live near wherever the hell you are, I swear. But if you have access to the soil, and if you look historically, many revolutions on this planet have been not to speak of other planets, but have been caused because people demanded access to the means of survival. That's what it means to have access to the soil. You have access to the means of survival because that is where food comes from. And, the energy required to build a home has never increased. I'm not talking about the cost, the price, the dollars that you will spend to buy a home. This is completely separated from the energy required to build a home. The energy, the effort required to put up fucking four walls and a roof and insulate it and cover the interior with some siding, exterior with some siding, get a wood stove, get any solar panels, get a heat pump, you can have any arrangement of fixings for your comforts. The energy required to do this has not inflated. It has only become easier. Once upon a time we had to hand nail everything and we had to hand saw everything. We have electric saws. We have pneumatic nailers, and even now we have battery powered nailers and battery powered saws. It's even easier. It's so much more convenient than working your entire life. You can work, and I'm trying to test this theory. It's like, I think you can work for about a year and afford a piece of dirt somewhere and build a home. I'm pretty sure. And then we can grow our own food. And we can create abundance where we are. And we can do this with all of our friends. And we can live in a way that does not require our wage slavery, perpetual wage slavery, to exist. And I think this is a part of a future that makes sense. And imagine raising kids in this environment. Raising kids in an environment where they see where food comes from. They see how much energy is required to build themselves a home. Where they get to participate in what is required to live. And from this base, go and see what they want to do in the world. Because, we are not in a situation of of leisure. We're not in a situation where we have the ability to help. Most people, we don't have that leisure generally. And it's I think someone said you have to help yourself before you help other people. I think it's very heartwarming to help people from positions of disempowerment, but I think for building a long-term future, the saying is correct. And I don't mean to say be selfish. I mean to say be stable. Be stable. And don't help people into your boat that's leaking. Help people onto solid ground. This is an appropriate future to me, and this is how you can participate in it. So that's at least my conclusion. That's my conclusion about it. So, I'll probably start writing these down and make better scripts maybe, but I do like just speaking, and I like just downloading as much information as I can that reforms my perspective, and then sharing these updates, these changes that I think are important, and then again, but I won't get into that now. Yep. I guess that's it. All right. Thank you.